You're listening to the Options Insider Radio Network, the home of the Options Podcast. For more quality options programs, visit theoptionsinsider.com or search for Options Insider Radio Network in your podcast provider of choice. Listeners can also access all of our programming through our mobile app available in the iTunes and Google Play stores. Select programs are also available via live stream at mixlr.com/options-insider. That's mixlr.com/options-insider. Don't forget to follow along with your favorite programs and submit your own questions for the hosts at twitter.com/options, stocktwits.com/options, facebook.com/theoptionsinsider, or via questions at theoptionsinsider.com. You wanted it. You got it. A radio program that helps teach you options trading inside and out, basic to complex. This is Options Boot Camp. Whether you want to learn how to protect your portfolio, generate income, or even become a master of volatility, your Options Boot Camp drill instructors, Mark Longo and Dan Passarelli, will break it all down for you. If you trade options, you've got to ask yourself, why would you choose an options trading platform that puts investors first? At public.com, there are no commissions or per contract fees. And more importantly, it's the only platform where you can earn a rebate on every single contract traded. That means you can save on your options trading costs and keep more of your capital in play. Whenever you trade options on Public, your savings are automatically applied. So, don't change your strategy, change your platform, and see the difference in your bottom line. No commissions, no per contract fees. And it's the only options trading platform where you can earn a rebate on every contract traded. To learn more, please visit public.com/optionsbootcamp. Paid for by Public Investing. Options not suitable for all investors and carry significant risk. Full disclosures in podcast description. Fall in boot. It's time to get into peak options trading shape. It's time for Options Boot Camp.
All right, everybody, let's do it. Episode 2 of our doubleheader here for OBC. My name, of course, Mark Longo from theoptionsinsider.com, as well as from the network upon which all of you folks are binging. If you're saying doubleheader, what's he talking about? Well, of course, if you're listening to us live on the Pro, you got episode 1 already. You're listening to episode 2 right now in your ear holes. If you're listening on demand, it's just the next episode, same bat time next week on the network. Of course, if you want to check out the Pro, see what all the fun is about, get 2 additional exclusive shows, do a lot of great learning and some great unusual activity analysis and some great trade ideas as well. TheOptionsInsider.com/pro is the place to go. As we're coming up against it already, we had so much fun on episode 1, and I got to get to the futures rundown after this show. So let's welcome on Dan, the man from Frankfurt, aka the black-hatted one himself, Passarelli from MTM. Mr. P, welcome back to the show, sir. It's been so long.
Hey, man, it seems like it's been forever ago, Mark. But then again, it seems like it's just been minutes ago.
I know you missed me, Dan. Luckily, we got more grist for the mill as we head right on into a little bit of basic training.
All right, Boot, it's time to get in line. What you're going to do is learn. You're going to learn how options work. Do you hear me? Yes, sir. You're going to learn options trading inside and out, basic to complex. There will be no failures. Do you hear me? Yes, sir. Pull in, prepare to learn. Yes, sir.
All right, everybody, welcome to the basic training, the portion of the show where we break down some basic options concept or technique or product and explain what the heck it is and how you can utilize it in your portfolio. And Dan, today's topic was inspired by a listener question we got a few episodes ago. I love this handle, Jose Josie. Jose Josie says, can Mark and Dan please spend some time explaining binary options and how they work? and differ from traditional options? Thanks. Well, Dan, a very timely question. We talked about this a lot on our big election night spectacular. So if you want a 4-hour, not quite all binary discussion, but they got in there a lot, make sure you're checking out the election night spectacular if you missed it, listeners. Another reason you should be listening to the full network. It's available there in the archives. Just scroll back a little bit. Dan joined me on that, so it was very much a mini options boot camp there. Dan, when I say the term binary options to you, what leaps to mind, sir?
You know what leaps to mind is when binary options, when oh crap, what's the name of that place that Dan Cook worked at for a while?
Nadex.
Oh, Nadex. Yeah. When Nadex first started, I think it was a previous iteration of Nadex called like Street Hedge or something weird. I don't know. But it was
Hedge Street.
Yeah. I was employed by the CBOE's Options Institute teaching options, and they came in and they were like, I don't know. I think they were just trying to get some advice on how to teach how these work. And so me and a couple other people at the Institute, we kind of looked at it and worked on it and gave some thoughts on it. But then they had this promotion. And this is like, oh my gosh, this is like probably 2004. And they had this promotion, and it was open an account, fund it, make a profitable trade, and we're going to give you an iPod Nano or something.
Ooh, big time back then.
Yeah. It was an iPod that like clipped to your shirt or whatever you want to clip it to. And so I opened an account with $100. I made this extremely high probability trade. I closed it for a profit of $1, and I got the iPod Nano, and I closed the account.
So what you're saying is you scammed Hedge Street. You're the reason they're no longer around.
I totally did.
That's awesome. It's funny you bring up Hedge Street. I haven't thought about that name in forever. But I was there, and it was the FIA Boca conference. You're right. It probably was around that 2004 timeframe. It was definitely during the Bush Jr. administration, I recall it, because their Defense Department at that time, Dan, as you'll recall, got into a whole bunch of trouble for creating a hypothetical terrorism futures market after 9/11. You remember that?
No.
So they got slammed, even though they were just using it to try to predict the next event. There was some sound theory behind it, but the PR behind it was awful. It seemed like people were trying to speculate on terrorist events. So they got just taken to the woodshed, and it was just bad PR. In the immediate aftermath of that, Dan, is when Hedge Street decided to announce their effectively event futures and event contracts, and people were freaking out. I remember even at the briefing, these are terrorism futures. What are you doing? So they got a lot of pushback right away. It was a rough time for them. They, of course, merged, I should say, into Nadex, which we'll get into all that fun in a second, listeners. But we got so excited going about Dan ripping off Hedge Street for an iPod Nano. We forgot to explain what the hell a binary option is. So let's start there, listener. That's what I get for asking Dan to play word association with me. It takes me down a wild rabbit hole of scammery. All right, let's go. What the hell are we talking about? What is all this madness? What are binary options? You're probably familiar with regular options. Listeners, you've been listening to this show for a while. If you're new, welcome. But of course, regular options have things like, theta, vega, all these things we've talked about a million times. They have intrinsic value. They have time premium. They have volatility, all these things that you use to kind of work together to make up the options price. You don't have to throw all that out the window, but you throw most of it out the window when you're talking about binaries. Binaries, as the name implies, is really kind of an on or off event type contract. You are speculating on hedging against whether a particular event could be the price of crude oil getting above a certain price, could be, as in recent history, an election coming to pass, whether that event happens or not. And if the event happens, that contract will go out at full price. If it doesn't happen, that contract will go out worthless. That's pretty much the gist of it. Now, the pricing of these is kind of interesting. Dan mentions Nadex/Hedge Street. They were the first that I saw that really come up. Maybe this convention would use elsewhere. And for a long time, by the way, listeners, when I say binary options, if Dan had asked me that question in reverse, he said, what is your word association? I would have said scammers and fraudsters, because for a long time, binary options were exclusively the domain of international scammers and hucksters because they weren't legal here in the US. So it was a bunch of Estonian and all these other places, African options exchanges, quote unquote, that exclusively listed binary options and were there just to rip you off. So it was a very shady area. Along came Head Street, which became eventually Nadex. They were the first really regulated, listed, approved binary venue you could trade on here in the US. And they had real products, things about indexes and crude oil and everything else out there. And they were on some of our early shows years ago out there. So they had some interesting ideas. They were a great gateway drug for folks who were on the retail side, wanted to dip their toes in options or futures, maybe didn't have the capital to do so. Binaries are a great way to do that. Another good thing about binaries is they're usually pretty cheap. Again, I mentioned that probability being the genesis of the price. Most of these binaries are priced from effectively 0 to 100. And the price is going to fluctuate based on the perceived probability of that event coming to pass. Let's say, for example, you're going to trade a binary for some event, and the probability of that event coming to pass is probably, let's say, around 40%, according to your analysis, according to the market's analysis. So you know what? The price of that binary is going to be probably 35 cents at 45 cents, somewhere around that 40% probability level. So the prices are very intuitive. Most binaries are going to be priced from a penny all the way up to $1. $1, of course, being 100. That is, the event has effectively come to pass. You know, a penny or zero means the event has not come to pass. That's what you're dealing with. At some point in this option's lifespan, it will be worth 0 or it will be worth 100. There's no getting around that. So that's what you're dealing with when it comes to binaries. Now, Dan mentioned, of course, Head Street. That became Nadex, and that was it for a long time. The game has changed in recent years for binaries. The first real big change we saw in the US was CME adding their event contracts. These came online back in September of 2022. So that was an interesting thing because for a long time, I know behind the scenes talking to both of these venues that CME wanted nothing to do with the binaries and the Nadex folks and everything else like that because it was the domain of scammers. Then lo and behold, CME listed their own binary contracts. So it kind of legitimized them. And for some folks out there who were a little bit skeptical, they added it with 11 contracts. They've since expanded. You can now go to CME and trade binaries on S&P daily, S&P quarterly and yearly, NASDAQ daily, quarterly, and yearly, Russell 2000, the Euro USD, the E-mini Dow, gold, silver, copper, WTI, nat gas, and Bitcoin. So all binaries, all event contracts on products that CME currently lists. So it's a way to drive volume back and forth between their own products. But it's an interesting thing. It's a regulated entity. You've heard of CME. They're not going anywhere. Now, I say most binaries price between 0 and 100. CME decided to do their own thing. I have no idea why. They listed them as 1 to 20, so they were 1/5 size. So if you wanted to back into the probability, let's say the price was 5 cents, you had to multiply times 5 to get the actual probability, which was 25%, which was an idiotic way to do that. They realized that. They have now fixed that. They are now priced 1 to 100 like every other binary on the planet. It was just a bad look, and it kind of hurt their volume. I think things are growing now. And, you know, another thing to mention, I said binaries are traditionally, they've been viewed through the lens of very short-term trade, sometimes as short as a few minutes. That is now changing with this newer iteration of binaries. I mentioned NASDAQ yearlies. I mentioned NASDAQ quarterlies. Those are obviously longer-term trades. A lot of the election stuff that we just talked about, and we'll talk about again in a few minutes, were obviously much longer-term trades as well. So the time frame for binaries has changed quite a bit as well. Fast forward to this year, listeners, and the binary game changed again. I remember talking to the Nadex folks a long time ago saying, man, are you guys ever going to have products on things outside of the norm? Let's say sporting events or elections. That was a big thing. And they all said, we would love to, but the CFTC would never allow it. Well, that game changed this year. You may have heard of Kalshi. They were one of those binary platforms. They were offering congressional race binaries. CFTC blocked it. Well, then another appeals court came in and lifted that ban in October of this year, which is why all of a sudden we had an explosion of events/election binary markets just in time for the election here in the US. So Kalshi benefited from that. All of a sudden they had an election market. We saw Thomas Petterfy and IB piggyback on that ruling. They launched Forecast EX. So all of a sudden, you had 2 approved listed venues here in the US that you could actually trade binaries on the election, which is wild. Never existed before here in the US. Of course, if you're international, you had Polymarket. That one still not available to domestic listeners out there. A couple of things to mention about these markets. Obviously, they're going to be longer term. If you listened to our election night spectacular, you know that Petterfy's markets don't pay off until January 7th. There's a reason for that. We all know what happened January 6th 4 years ago. So something to bear in mind. If you thought you're going to get paid the very next day on the election, you're kind of sitting on a contract that's worth pretty much almost full value. I'm sure Trump on these platforms is 99 cents right now as opposed to $1 or 100. But just something to bear in mind. Also, another weird nuance, if you're trading the Forecast EX binaries, it's a yes-no market. So you could buy the binaries. Most people think of binaries, will an event happen, yes or no? Yes being, of course, the way most people view it. So if it's going to happen, they buy the binary. If it doesn't, they don't. You can buy a no binary on Forecast EX as well, which is a little counterintuitive for people. So seeing those markets fluctuate was kind of interesting. Also, there is no way to close by selling on Forecast EX. You have to, if you buy the yes, let's say you bought the yes on Trump winning, it is now trading 99 cents at $1, I'm assuming. You can't sell it at 99 cents. You have to buy the no to effectively exit that. That's the closing transaction. So that's a little bit weird. Just something to bear in mind. These marketplaces are still kind of Wild West out there. All right, Dan, I laid down a lot in terms of binaries. What else you want to add for our listeners, sir?
Jeez Louise, yeah. I wonder how popular they're going to become, because this year, because they actually are approved, and this was the first big presidential cycle, and they were talked about by a lot of people and in the media because it's a really great place to get percent likelihood of something happening based on the general public. Now, that's notwithstanding all the stuff we talked about on election night and all that, which were some really great points. People should probably go back and review that if you haven't already. But, in that regard, they kind of are marketing themselves a little bit. It's probably really smart marketing that they listed them on these pretty controversial events, although a presidential race should not be controversial. However, I guess it's better than the marketing concept that I came up with for them years ago. But my idea was binary options, not just for Cypriot gangsters anymore. It never really caught on, though.
Yeah, no, that was. I remember talking to your buddy you mentioned there earlier, and he told me he was going to a conference in Cyprus. And I was like, what kind of conferences are in Cyprus? Oh, yeah, the binary options conference, because that's the only place that they were legal. So, yes, listeners, this was the exclusive domain of scammers until not that long ago. And now, fast forward a few years, and now, Dan, I think if there's one takeaway from this episode today is that we have not seen the last of binary options exchanges and products. Everyone in the business, listeners, saw the success and the interest in these election markets this cycle. I've already talked to people in the exchange space here in the options world. They are all busy, feverishly working to spin up their own alternatives on this. So we have not seen the last. Dan, just think about it. Between the last election cycle and now, just 4 years, we had the onset of 0-day options and election binaries. And most of that was just in the last 2 years, indeed in the last 2 months. We have another 4 years to go. Who knows what wild moonshot AR, VR, AI products we'll have by this time in 4 years, Dan? What do you think?
Yeah, I know, man. It's very, very interesting. Oh gosh. I mean, we've talked a lot about this stuff. I don't want to open up a whole big can of worms and also point out that, like online gambling, kind of was a thing and then got banned and then became a thing and now is like geez Louise, if you have a player's card at any casino, like that's all they're trying to push on you, and they're taking out tables and putting in kiosks to gamble. And I'll tell you, there's a lot of crossover between some of the things we're talking about here today and that.
That there is, listeners, as we keep on rolling into a little bit of your mail call.
Mail call. Time to look at questions submitted by our listeners.
All right, listeners, we are coming up against that. I do have to get to another show in a few minutes, listeners. No rest for the wicked here. I wanted to get to this question from Travis. He had a question about our app. He says, I've been listening to the Options Bootcamp from the beginning. Well, thank you, Travis. You're one of the many who goes back to episode 1. It's a lot of listening. We appreciate your effort, though. He says, and Mark mentions an Options Insider app. Is this still available? I have looked on the Play Store, and I can't find it. Thank you. Well, short answer is it's not available right now, Travis. Neither the iOS or the Google Play version are available. It's in the process of being updated. So to do that, they have to actually remove it from the store. It's a weird thing. We don't build the app. We have developers who build that and maintain it for us. And so in order to do that, they have to take it out to update it, then resubmit it. So it's going to be out of the stores for a little bit, but I'll let you know as soon as the update is finished and we have a brand spanking new shiny version of the app. I do recommend the app for those of you who want to go back to episode 1. It is the best way to get access to all of our stuff. Of course, you can go to our website as well. If you're going through iTunes or some of the other stores, Spotify, whatever, they might limit you to, let's say, 500 episodes or something like that for some of our shows. And some of our shows go a lot longer than that. So just bear in mind, if you want the whole kit and caboodle, the whole fire hose, the app is a great way to do it. If you already have the app, congratulations, it's still running. You're fine. But you can't go and download it new right now. We'll let you know. Should be pretty soon when it's available again for the update. So Travis, great question for sending in that great question. Our producers will reach out to you with something fun for you. That is a great question. But yes, just something to bear in mind. A lot of you have reached out with that same question. Where's your app? I want to check it out. It'll be coming back soon. We'll let you know soon, listeners, when that app is available. All right, listen, this is going to do it for us this week. Kind of short and sweet this week. We have a lot going on. We are recording this, of course, as part of a doubleheader. So I do need to keep rolling into the Futures Rundown in a few minutes. So if you're not done with Dan's, you want Dan Squared, Dan the Man Gramzo will be joining me in just a few minutes. If you're listening live on the Pro to talk futures, if you're listening after the fact, that'll be hitting your device of choice whenever you're listening to your favorite podcasts out there. Of course, if you want to join us on the Pro, theoptionsinsider.com/pro is the place to go to learn more. And of course, keep supporting the folks who support these shows that have been coming to you since 2013. Public.com/optionsbootcamp. It's really easy. All you have to do is go to that URL, let them know you're coming from our show, and guess what? You get more episodes of Options Bootcamp in your hot little ear holes. It's a win-win for everybody. Public.com/optionsbootcamp. And Dan, where should they go if they want some MTM goodness? Maybe they too want to learn how to scam a iPod Nano from a binary options exchange.
I'll be able to help you out. I know all the tricks. Make your way on over to markettaker.com, 2 T's in a row, and you can join a chat room. You can DM me personally there, or coaches or some of our other students you can interact with, share trade ideas, and we've got some free classes there as well. So that's markettaker.com.
There you go, markettaker.com. Don't forget the second T, which, as the robots reminded us last week, Dan, stands for theta. Markettaker.com to learn more. That's going to do it for us here on the show today. Not on the network, though. No rest for the wicked, listeners, because I am off immediately to talk about all things futures. And I'll be back again tomorrow with our usual doubleheader of the option block as well as This Week in Futures Options. And then back again Friday with volatility views. And then, of course, for all you cool cats in the Pro, one final time, to talk all sorts of wild, unusual activity with options oddities. You kind of want to check that show out. It's definitely a banger. It's been a fun one. A lot of great trading ideas coming across the screens on that show. Of course, go to the Pro to learn about that, theoptionsinsider.com/pro. Then we're back again next week. Same bat time, same bat channel. Another episode of Options Bootcamp. Stay safe out there, everybody.
If you trade options, you've got to ask yourself, why would you choose an options trading platform that puts investors first? At public.com, there are no commissions or per contract fees. And more importantly, it's the only platform where you can earn a rebate on every single contract traded. That means you can save on your options trading costs and keep more of your capital in play. Whenever you trade options on Public, your savings are automatically applied. So, don't change your strategy, change your platform, and see the difference in your bottom line. No commissions, no per contract fees. And it's the only options trading platform where you can earn a rebate on every contract traded. To learn more, please visit public.com/optionsbootcamp. Paid for by Public Investing. Options not suitable for all investors and carry significant risk. Full disclosures in podcast description. You're listening to the Options Insider Radio Network, the home of the Options Podcast. For more quality options programs, visit theoptionsinsider.com or search for Options Insider Radio Network in your podcast provider of choice. Listeners can also access all of our programming through our mobile app available in the iTunes and Google Play stores. Select programs are also available via live stream at mixlr.com/options-insider. That's mixlr.com/options-insider. Don't forget to follow along with your favorite programs and submit your own questions for the hosts at twitter.com/options, stocktwits.com/options, facebook.com/theoptionsinsider, or via questions at theoptionsinsider.com.